Representative Elison.
Motion to encircle HB 120, time change amendments.
Oh, Representative, are you sure you want to do that?
Yes, we do.
It is up to the will of the body. Okay. Representatives, the motion before us is that we uncircle HB 120. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All in favor say no. No. Ooh, rule that motion passes. Sorry. I wish. Okay, Representative Elison, the bill's uncircled and before you for its consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is such a good bill. No, I appreciate you letting us uncircle this and have the final discussion and vote here today. Just again, as a reminder, to pick up from where we left off the other day, and that is the purpose of this bill is not to try to argue and defend or promote either savings time or standard time. Again, that debate has been had for decades. There's never going to be a winner of that debate because we all have very strong opinions as to which one we prefer, which one we like. The purpose of this bill is simply this, that the citizens of the state of Utah for years upon years upon years have been asking this body to stop our clocks from moving backward and forward twice per year. So the purpose of this bill, House Bill 120, is to simply say what is in law currently in the state of Utah is that we will go to savings time if the federal government makes that decision. What this bill does is it says until such time, we do have control over, as a body, to stop our clocks from moving backward and forward each year by implementing this bill, which would put us to standard time. Then if the federal government changes the law federally, then we would move to savings time. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I am open to any questions.
Thank you, Representative Elison. Representative Elison.
Easy,
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of this bill, and let me tell you why. One of the reasons that I continue to serve is because I have a daughter with very, very special needs. She doesn't understand what this bill is about, but the one thing that she understands is when we change the clock twice a year, it messes her schedule up. And it sometimes takes weeks to adjust either way. The benefits of going to a steady, no change, I believe from a health perspective, especially for children and people with special needs that don't necessarily understand what's happening, far outweigh the benefits of not being able to have a little extra time in the summer to stay outside and do different things. So I think that whatever our opinions are about standard versus daylight savings, the health benefits and logistical benefits make so much more sense to just keep it consistent. So I commend my distant relative who, the good representative from Southern Utah that lost the A out of his name several generations ago for his work on this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Elison. Further discussion to the bill, Representative Chu.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm a little bit concerned, but this bill is probably the one that has came up the most since you and I came here. It's actually the third time it's made it to the floor, this stuff about daylight savings. You know, experience is the best teacher. That is why we don't touch a hot pot a second time, and why we don't walk behind a horse because somebody else got kicked and they told us about it. So I'll tell you about my experience with daylight savings. As I look across the floor, there's only about 12% of us that could have possibly lived when we didn't change our clocks. And I can remember 1966 when the Uniform Time Act was passed and we started changing our clocks. We started changing them end of April and back again the first part of October. Folks liked that when it happened because it gave them longer daylight evenings in the summertime. And but then I can remember real well January 6th, 1974, as the good sponsor has saying. Actually, I don't remember January 6th because that was a Sunday, but I do remember I was in college Monday morning, January 7th, and we were in the middle of an oil embargo, and gas was short supply, and we didn't have the opportunity. But with the combination of daylight savings and the gas, I started driving my car to college classes instead of walking because it was cold and it was in the morning and dark. And so I actually used more gas when I changed back to daylight savings. Of course, this isn't about changing it to daylight savings yet. But if we're going to be going back, maybe we ought to consider going back to 55-mile-an-hour speed limits to save, like we did in the early 70s. That would, cut back on the pollution because our cars would be more efficient. We'd probably also, after a spike in road rage, get back to being more comfortable driving quieter on the interstates. But, like I said, 88% of the House members couldn't have experienced that. And it kind of reminds me of, we done that back of what an old cowboy that worked for my grandpa used to say, looking across the floor here, 88% of us weren't there to experience what happened back then. And like the old cowboy said, most of you weren't even a twinkle in your daddy's eye when that happened. So Mother Nature dictates my length of day at the ranch, and it's the sun is my clock. This either way won't affect me very much, but I want to warn you, be careful what you ask for. You just might get it. Thanks, Mr. Speaker.
Good advice, Representative Chu. Further discussion to the bill. Representative Tom Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I spoke to this bill earlier, and I just had a lot of chance to think about this, and I feel like a lot of my constituents have told me that, and it's very clear that I need to vote for it because they want it, but I'm afraid that what this does for our spring sports and our fall sports throughout our state, it's going to be devastating to the soccer players, lacrosse players, football players that practice on unlighted fields after school in the spring and the fall. They're going to be significantly limited on their ability to do those outside activities. As somebody that, as I mentioned in a previous statement on this bill, works 2 jobs, a lot of the work that I do is after hours, and unfortunately, we're not going to change. We only get so much sunlight, regardless of what the clocks say. We're not going to change the time work starts. We're not going to change the time school starts. So what this does is it cuts into an hour of very, very productive evening time. And I understand the concern. And putting out 4 surveys, I will vote for this, but I'm extremely nervous about what happens when we actually implement this. And so I just want to be on record saying that. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Peterson. Further discussion to the bill. Representative Okerlund.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My comments are probably more going to represent the viewpoint of Representative Peterson rather than the eloquence of Representative Chu, but the amount of popularity that I've heard about not changing the clocks is overwhelming. People do not want to change the clocks. That is until they find out that what they're changing, what we're committing to is not having that extra hour. And for the people who run sports in this state, we just don't have enough fields with lights, and we don't have enough daytime to get all the sports done. Just as a sports dad, please save our summers. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Okerlund. Further discussion to the bill. Representative Auxier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to echo the previous 2 representatives. I think that we don't understand what this is going to do to our kids and their abilities to play sports, and even us for the mental health benefits of being able to be outside and be in the sunlight. And so many kids participate in their high school sports, and this is really going to cut into tennis and golf and, you know, a lot of the other sports that were already mentioned. And I think we really need to think about what we're asking for here. Because when you do talk to people, everyone loves the idea of stopping the clocks, like it's been mentioned, but when they actually realize what it's going to be, I hear the exact opposite, and they would rather continue switching the clocks twice a year. It's not that big of a deal. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Auxier. Further discussion to the bill. Representative, wow, we've got this. Representative Stoddard.
Mr. Speaker, I would call previous question.
Previous question has been called, which has the effect of ending debate. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. Rule that motion fails. Representative Strong.
You can call the question when I'm done. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Remind me never to call on Stoddard again.
Let's talk about something a little bit more important than sports, and that's my yard. I get home from work usually around 7:30, and if we pass this bill, my yard is going to dilapidate and fall into disrepair. I also speak in financial peril. I had one of my best clients reach out to me and said, hey, looks like you guys, he doesn't even live in Utah, he lives in Arizona. He says, you guys have a bill for daylight savings. He passed that. It's the worst when I come to Utah and my calendar gets changed and my Outlook calendar and all that. But I agree with some of the comments that we might just get what we're asking for. I think that light in the evening for certainly sports, yards, camping and events and things like that is vital, and I think we should keep it. So those of you that are voting for this bill just because you think that's what your constituents are telling you, maybe should gather a little courage and do the right thing and vote in opposition to this bill. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Strong. Further discussion to the bill. Representative Peck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Truthfully, I've gone back and forth on this bill, and I think the reason why is because I'm a person who likes to vote by principle. That's kind of my main thing, and what we're really debating here is preference. And that's a really hard thing to make law on, is preference. I know sometimes that comes into our laws, and I have been contacted, and the overwhelming majority of all of the hundreds of responses to polls and contacts on email has been that people don't want the clocks to shift for similar reasons. As the good representative from Salt Lake Valley talked about with his child, that many people are worried about their children and making the change. And so this is one of those things that I think we have to decide, is it worth making this decision on preference? Truthfully, I'd probably rather just have the bill go away, if I'm going to be completely honest. But we really are just talking about preference here. That's why there's so much debate.
Thank you, Representative Peck. Further discussion to the bill. Representative Acton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think all of us have constituents, all of our constituents almost, want the clocks to stop changing every 6 months or so. But I do think, because we are making a decision, I think when the summer comes, and I think they'll be cursing the legislature every evening in the summer when they can't finish the baseball game, they can't garden, they have to go in because of the early darkness. And I think what we should invest our time and efforts in instead is urging Congress to act. I think they're on the verge of doing something. If there's anything we could do to get Congress to act and make it permanent, a choice permanent for us, that would be preferable to cutting short every summer evening. I really think that will just not go over well in the long run. It sounds good, but I think in the long run, it's going to make people mad. So, thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion to the bill. Representative Fiefia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of this bill simply because the overwhelming majority of my district wants this to happen. And if this is a case where we're looking at preference, I think sometimes we like to believe up here that we know better than our constituents, and sometimes we need to give them what they want. As it relates to sports, as someone who played high school sports and college sports, in high school, even during the fall, we started at 5 a.m. and then practice again after school. And so, yes, we'll have to adjust our hours, but I'm sure we'll be able to adjust. And I know there's a lot of golfers out there that may be opposed to this because they lose the hour after work to golf. But as a golf dad and avid golfer myself, I promise you, we will find a time to golf anytime during the day, even if it means that we have to leave work a little early. But I think this is a case where we rely on our constituents and ask people what they want, since it is based on preference. And that is how I'll be voting with my constituents, which is for this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Fiefia. Further discussion to the bill, Representative Dominguez.
Thank you, Speaker. Would the fine gentleman answer to a question?
Representative Elison, will you yield to a question?
Yes.
Yes.
Can you clarify if once we move this, we would be able to change it to daylight savings, or are we planning to stay in this?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That is a great question. So the way the bill is written, and just again as a reminder, what is currently in law in the state of Utah is that we will be going to daylight savings time. That's automatically going to happen if the federal government acts. So what this does is we will go to standard time in the meantime. So once we pass this bill, it will go to standard time. Then if the federal government makes the law change, we would then go to savings time permanently.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative. Thank you, Representative Dominguez. Further discussion to the bill, Representative Shipp.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, I don't know that anybody has mentioned this. If I missed this and somebody talked about this, I apologize for bringing this up. But when I grew up in my area, and also still in my district in Iron County, there's a lot of small farmers, okay? And a lot of these people can't afford to just go full-time on the farm or ranch. And so it's really critical for them. They have a full-time job, 8 to 5 job. They come home, they need that extra hour in the spring through the fall to take care of raising their crops or doing their farm or ranch work. And so I'm opposed to this. I would love to go permanent daylight savings time, but to go permanent standard time is not what is needed for these folks. I happen to be a golfer too. The good representative from Salt Lake is an avid golfer. I don't know that I'd say I'm an avid golfer. I'm probably more of a hacker, but I like to golf too. But you got to consider also the golfers, the hikers, the mountain bikers. There's a lot of activities that our people in this state do. It's a beautiful state, and they want to have that extra hour while they can for those activities. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Shipp. Further discussion to the bill, Representative Kyle. Representative Kyle.
I call the question.
Previous question's been called, which has the effect of ending debate. There's several lights up here. Well, anyways, place the motion. All in favor of calling previous questions, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? I rule that motion passes. Debate has ended. Representative Elison, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I love the fact that we have this opportunity to have discussions like this. I've heard people say this bill is such a waste of time. No pun intended, no pun intended. I beg to differ. Every one of us, we were all elected, in my opinion, by very competent voters. I think people know exactly what this means. I think people have been living this for decades. They know exactly what it means to be on mountain time If they don't understand, they can look at our neighbor to the south, Arizona, they do it perfectly fine. A lot of people say, we want that extra hour in the sunlight. Little lesson in science here. The earth is on an axis, right? As the days get toward June 21st, the days get longer and longer and longer. What a lot of people may not recognize is Salt Lake City on June 21st has 44 more minutes of sunlight than does Phoenix, Arizona, because we're further north. So it's a 16-minute difference here, right, in terms of amount of sunlight in the summertime. I don't think it's a waste of time because there are people out there who this is a real deal. I appreciate my good cousin who mentioned his daughter. I had a text from a mom who told me, she says, I have an autistic kid. Every time that clock changes, I have to spend about 3 to 4 weeks readjusting my child twice a year. She says, I'm so sick of it, please change it. You guys, this is the only thing we have control over. The law allows us to do this. This is the only thing we can do to answer the call. I've heard from many of you that the percentage of people, our constituents who voted for us, who I think are intelligent people, have said in the numbers of 65, 72, 76, 83, 86, 90% of people want this bill to pass because they're so sick and tired of the clocks moving back and forth. Now, there's a lot of things that you all said that I'm going to address, as many of them as I possibly can. Unlit fields for students playing spring and fall sports. I had a conversation with UHSAA, right? My kids were part of that. We would go to Cedar City to play soccer. The varsity team, they play first. The JV team would play second until it got dark, and then it was over. And my comment to Mr. Cuff was, well, that's easy. You adjust the varsity game by 1 hour. Is that not doable? And he's like, well, yeah, of course it is. We adjust. It's not that hard to adjust 1 hour. We do it all the time. We allow football teams to leave extra early. We allow basketball teams to leave extra early if needed. Why can't we do that with spring and fall sports? They're just as important. It's not that big of a deal to adjust 1 hour. It's not. Leaving it to Congress. Folks, I don't know about you, I don't care to leave anything to Congress. If we don't pass this bill, we are once again punting the ball to the federal government. We did this 5 years ago unintentionally. We thought for sure it was going to pass. We thought it was going to go to savings time permanently. We passed the bill, which was great legislation. I thought it was awesome, very thoughtful. People were very insincere. But guess what? The federal government hasn't acted. And here we are, we're still switching our clocks back and forth. The people have asked us to do this, and we have not done it. Okay? So leaving it to Congress, I don't like that. The fact that people don't know what they're voting for, I disagree wholeheartedly. You want to talk about courage? I look at all the moms and all these parents of autistic kids, struggling kids, blacking out their windows at nighttime. There's all these arguments back and forth. Courage is people who live with this every day and continue to come up here and ask us to change this law, and we don't. That's courage to me. There's people that continue to ask and ask and ask. I'm simply saying to this body, you know what? We can answer. And I'm not going to go any further because I don't want to belabor this issue. We have a lot of bills that I don't want to die. But I love our process up here. I believe in it. I trust it. I will have to say, outside of working with some of the most incredible people, you have all become such great friends. I love being up here with you. But one of the things that's the most impressive part of serving in this legislature that I absolutely love, and I see it almost every day while we're here, is we all bring in these awesome little school groups. These little elementary kids and these high school kids, and their eyes are as big as dinner dishes. And we pull them in this room, and they look at the awe of this room. This is where we do the work of the people, and we point up to those words, Vox Populi. And we tell them, we do the voice of the people. We vote for the voice of the people. We do the work of the people. We tell them this every single time. My question is, are we doing the voice of the people? The people have asked at the tune of almost 80%. They want the clocks to stop moving. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, I ask you and encourage you to vote for this bill. Let's finally answer the call. People want us to pass this. Let's pass it. I trust the people and their vote. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I will finish.
Thank you, Representative. Voting will now be open on HB 120, time change amendments. Seeing all present having voted, voting is now closed. Sorry, go ahead, Representative Lisenby. Seeing all present having voted, voting is now closed. HB 120 passes this body 52 yes votes, 23 no votes, and will be sent to the Senate for its consideration.